So you'll be glad to know this is the last lecture of week 1, and let me say right off the bat, you will not have this many lectures typically if you're struggling with the workload, which obviously this week we had to get into theoretical foundations as well as the week's lectures themselves of the slots method. So moving forward you'll have a little bit less lectures, and then the more we go through the course it'll be more about writing programs as opposed to just listening to me talk, but hopefully it's been really useful. So I just want to finish off with a recap of this slots method to make sure that we're all really happy with it moving forward. And if you're not, don't worry, I've still got loads of examples coming through, and this is the process we're going to go through each and every time no matter what program we're writing. So we're going to get good with it, and the more effortful learning is, the more impactful it'll be further down the line. So as I'm bringing these up, I want you to stop the lecture if you need to. What considerations have we got at each point? And can you preempt what I'm going to say? Can you tell me the next thought process before I get to it? Be active in this process. So what is the first thing that we're going to ask ourselves? How many times per week can this person train? Then how many exercises do I typically put in a session? Is it 5, 6 or 7, not including our movement preparation, our finishers or our complementary and filler exercises? If you get more than that in, that's fine, but obviously logistically that creates a pressure as well as reducing the amount of time we can spend on each exercise, therefore either reducing the number of sets, or if we're going to do it with short rest periods, minimizing the per set effectiveness of it. So there's always a trade-off with all this. Know that it doesn't have to be fixed. We could have 5 on one day, 6 on another, 7 on another day. Just understand your total splits, and that's something that we might look at further down the line in terms of variety, where we can say, well, Monday is more of a volume-based day, so I'm going to have 5 slots. Wednesday is more of a normal day, I suppose, so we're going to have 6 slots. And then Friday is more of a density-based day where we're going to have 7 slots. And they can start to create variety from block to block and all these kind of things, but we'll get to that later on. Once I have my training frequency and my number of exercise slots per session, I've got my total exercise slots for the week. I'm then going to allocate this across my movement patterns, and hopefully you all created your own, or you're going to use the tables that I provided. You're going to allocate your slots over those movement patterns depending on the goal of the block. So is it balanced, where we're going to try and hit everything with a similar number of slots, or is it biased? And we're going to go through biased examples in the coming weeks. Allocate slots according to your training split. So we've said this person's training 3 days per week. I'm doing 5 exercise slots per session. I've got 15 exercise slots. This is how I'm going to distribute them over my movement patterns. Now I need to consider how I'm going to distribute them over my sessions. So I'm going to say this person's training 3 days per week. So I'm going to do 3 full body sessions, or you might do full body and then an upper and a lower. You might do a full body and then a full body push, full body pull. Again, the options are open to you. More opportunity for writing different variety of programs, but typically full body if somebody's training less than 4 days per week. Once we have that, we're going to try and allocate our slots to each session. So this is the example we looked at before, when somebody was training twice per week with 6 exercise slots per session. We allocated them out and we said, well, which movement patterns are being hit twice? They can get put in the columns first, and then we tried to distribute our single exercise slots per movement pattern to make sure that each session was fairly even. What do we look to do potentially with exercises that are on muscle groups that are only being hit once per week? Hopefully you're thinking, well, that we can apply greater amount of stress because we have longer to recover. How can we apply greater amounts of stress? More volume or more intensity in terms of rest pause, drop sets, etc. All scientifically backed, so we're doing some good stuff. We then take each session, so okay, session 1, we take our movement patterns and we say, how are we breaking them up? Am I doing a main lift and 3 paired sets or whatever it is? So in the examples we showed, it was just 3 paired sets or 3 supersets. And then we want to try and make them work both logistically and physically. So I'm thinking, not putting 2 unilateral movements together, not putting vertical pulling with hip hinging, etc., etc. Jig it around to make it work as much as I need to. If their goal is fairly balanced, I'm going to put the more demanding exercises at the top. However, if somebody's got a goal of improving their arms or their back, I might put those exercises earlier in the session when central fatigue is lower. But so at this point, I've got a nice template in place, and then I'm going to try and select my exercises based on the goal of the block, the client tolerances, the client's skill level, and those logistics that we spoke about. With that in place, we then select the sets and reps, obviously based on the goal of the block, etc., etc. But this then creates the opportunity for what I call quick slots. Well, we've basically got templates because you know your total exercise slots for the week typically. So most of your clients will either train 2, 3, or 4 days a week. You typically know how you're going to allocate that over the course of the week most of the time. So for example, you're not going to have 4 knee flexion movements. You might just have 1 in there, whatever it might be. You know what training splits work well for you, whether it's anterior, posterior, or if it's full body or whatever it is. You then have this kind of little template to work from, and you know that it's kind of scientifically sound from our theoretical underpinnings. You know which movement patterns work well, logistically and physically, and then all that happens is every time that a client comes in, you select the exercises based on their level, their needs, their wants, their preferences. And of course, if they want a balanced program, this will work really well. If they want a biased program, we can still go to that initial training split at the top and say, well, where can I allocate more horizontal pulling or whatever it might be? But it's a really nice, easy place to start from. Or we can make those adjustments based on the goal of the block. So if this block is more horizontal push dominated, press up dominated, we put more slots in horizontal pushing, etc., etc. But going through that same thought process each time, I can create 101 different programs. So I really hope this first week has been helpful. Please continue to comment and interact in the Facebook group, because these lectures and these tasks are only one part of the mentorship. I think we've got a great group of individuals. So getting in there and sharing our experiences, our questions, our concerns, our further thoughts, how we're developing this, it's going to be great. But thank you for your first efforts this week. We're going to continue along this theme in week 2.